Look at this exact moment. The crowd is absolutely deafening. A top 10 giant has just been toppled, and the commentators are left completely speechless. The energy in the stadium is electric. Alex Eala stands there breathing heavily after hitting a cold and calculated forehand. Winner down the line that just shattered the established hierarchy of the WTA Tour. This is 2026, and she is officially the most dangerous player on the professional circuit. She is taking down giants left and right. She is dismantling players who are taller and stronger and supposedly much better equipped to win. But we need to pause for a second. We need to rewind the tape. Because just 24 months ago, this exact same girl was standing on a silent and empty court. She was playing a low-tier ITF event in the middle of nowhere with barely anyone watching. The stands were totally empty. The silence was heavy and unforgiving. Analysts and scouts were shaking their heads in the background. They looked at her physical frame and decided she simply was not big enough or explosive enough to survive modern tennis. They said her ceiling was low. They said she would get absolutely crushed by the heavy baseline hitters on the main tour. They wrote her off as just another talented junior who would never make a real impact at the highest level of the sport. So what exactly happened in the dark? What secret did she unlock to go from a struggling prospect to the most terrifying giant killer we have seen in years? How do you overcome a massive physical disadvantage in a sport that has become entirely obsessed with raw power and speed? To understand how Alex Eala engineered the greatest underdog takeover in recent tennis history, we have to go back to the moment the entire tennis world almost gave up on her. Transitioning from a junior prodigy to the professional circuit is a graveyard of broken dreams. It is arguably the hardest leap in professional sports. So many kids dominate the junior level and then completely disappear when they turn pro. Alex won the US Open girls title and immediately carried the massive weight of an entire nation on her young shoulders. The expectations from the Philippines were astronomical. Everyone back home expected her to just breeze through the pro ranks and start collecting Grand Slam trophies immediately. But when she first stepped up to the main tour, the reality hit her like a runaway freight train. The professional tour was a completely different animal. The pace of the game was significantly faster. The balls were incredibly heavier. Her opponents were older and stronger and far more ruthless. They were overpowering her right off the court. She would hit what used to be a perfect winner in the juniors, and it would just come screaming back at her twice as fast. Opponents were serving huge bombs that pushed her 5 to 6 feet behind the baseline just to stay alive in the rally. It is a terrifying and humbling realization for a young athlete when you discover that your absolute best effort is suddenly not good enough anymore. Many players panic in this exact situation. They fire their coaches. They try to change everything about their technique. They develop bad habits, or they just break down mentally. But Alex did something completely different. She went completely silent. She did not complain to the media about unfair physical advantages or bad tournament draws. She looked at the harsh reality of her situation. She knew she could not magically grow taller overnight. She knew she could not build the brute strength of a 6-foot-tall power server. Instead, she went back to the practice court and started obsessing over the tiniest technical details. She realized that if she could not beat them with pure power, she had to beat them with geometry and perfect timing. She focused entirely on her footwork and movement. She spent thousands of lonely hours just drilling her court positioning. She wanted to be exactly where she needed to be, a fraction of a second early. She was trying to play the absolute perfect technical game in an era dominated by raw and brutal power. She was fighting for every single point like her entire career depended on it. It was mentally exhausting and it was pushing her right to the breaking physical point. You can only fight pure physics for so long before your body and your mind start to give way. The losses started piling up. The pressure from the media kept mounting. She was putting in the work of a true champion but getting the devastating results of a first-round qualifier. If you have ever felt like you were doing absolutely everything right, but still hitting a massive brick wall, you know exactly how she felt in those moments. That feeling of giving your absolute all and still falling painfully short is completely brutal. We are uncovering the deepest and most intense stories of resilience in sports, just like this one every single week. So if you want to understand how the greatest underdogs actually flip the script and conquer their giants, make sure you subscribe right now so you never miss these breakdowns. Let us dive straight into the darkest chapter of her career. Because right when she was doing everything she possibly could to survive, the bottom completely fell out. Every elite athlete hits a massive wall at some point in their career. But Alex did not just hit a wall, she was completely crushed under the terrifying weight of it. There was a painfully long and dark stretch where early round exits became a suffocating and inescapable pattern. Her global ranking was either in total freefall or completely paralyzed in the lower hundreds. You could visibly see the intense frustration building in her eyes match after agonizing match. It was the terrifying and silent realization that pure talent and relentless hard work were just not going to be enough to survive at this elite level. Let us look closely at one specific and brutal match during this absolute nightmare run. It was a scorching hot afternoon, and she was drawn against a classic modern power baseliner. We are talking about someone 6 inches taller and built entirely like a track sprinter. Alex was being systematically bullied and physically dismantled on the court. She was trapped so far behind the baseline, she was practically standing next to the line judges. She was completely helpless against these thunderous 115-mile-per-hour first serves. Every single time she managed to return the ball, it came back with even more destructive force and depth. The television camera zoomed in tightly on her face during a crucial changeover, and the look in her eyes was absolutely devastating. It was not just pure physical exhaustion, it was a deep and crippling self-doubt. She was looking at her racket like it was a completely foreign object. She was searching for answers in a game that suddenly felt utterly impossible to win. At this exact moment, the tracking data showed her average forehand speed drop by a staggering 15%. The television commentators immediately speculated that she was hiding a severe wrist injury. They thought her smaller frame was finally breaking down under the immense physical stress of the professional tour. But the truth was far more psychological and far more dangerous than any physical injury. She was not physically injured at all, she was hesitating. The constant and paralyzing fear of being overpowered and pushed around had slowly infected her perfect timing. When you lose that split second of total conviction against the best and most aggressive players in the world, you do not just lose the current point. You lose your entire identity and your fighting soul on the court. You become a hollow shadow of yourself. The sports critics and tennis analysts were absolutely merciless during this dark period. Tennis journalists openly stated that she had permanently hit her physical ceiling. They labeled her as just another overhyped junior prodigy who simply lacked the raw genetic tools to make the final leap to greatness. They confidently predicted she would spend the rest of her professional career grinding, away in the miserable shadows as a solid but easily forgettable mid-tier player. Nothing more and certainly nothing less. She was facing the total and painfully public collapse of her lifelong dream. The darkness was absolute and total. The profound isolation of being a losing tennis player traveling the world, alone in quiet hotel rooms, is a very specific kind of psychological hell. But inside that profound and crushing heartbreak, something incredibly powerful finally snapped. If you want to survive the heavy hitters and the towering giants of the sport, you absolutely cannot take a single step backward. You have to step directly into the fire and challenge them right on the baseline. And that is exactly what Alex decided to do in an act of pure desperation and unmatched tactical brilliance. She completely stopped playing a defensive and reactive game. She completely rewired her entire tactical DNA practically overnight. This massive transformation was not a slow or gradual process. It happened right in the middle of one defining and unforgettable match. She was facing a massive power player and was down a critical match point. The pressure in the stadium was absolutely suffocating. The old version of Alex would have retreated deep into the absolute corners of the court and prayed for an unforced error. She would have hit a safe and high defensive lob just to stay alive for one more passing shot. But something was fundamentally and beautifully different this time around. Instead of backing away into the shadows, she took a massive and defiant step forward right onto the baseline. She decided to take the incredibly heavy ball exceptionally early on the rise. This is widely considered the absolute hardest technical skill in modern tennis because it requires inhuman timing and total fearlessness. You are basically using the aggressive power of your opponent against them by redirecting the ball before it even reaches the peak of its bounce. The opponent hit a crushing cross-court forehand that was fully designed to end the match right then and there. I want you to picture this exact moment in ultra slow motion 4K detail. The massive stadium goes completely and eerily silent. The only sound left in the entire world is the heavy and rhythmic thud of her racing heartbeat. The yellow ball is spinning furiously and violently toward her. Weaker backhand side. She does not flinch for a single microsecond. She steps aggressively into the court and completely blocks out the paralyzing fear of missing. She unleashes a blistering flat backhand straight down the line. The ball explodes off her racket strings and paints the absolute outer edge of the sideline. The opponent does not even have time to move her feet or react. The crowd erupts into a completely deafening roar that shakes the foundation of the entire arena. It is the most dangerous and thrilling tactical shift we have seen on the professional tour this entire decade. Tell me right down in the comments if you have ever seen a young player completely reinvent their entire survival mechanism while facing a terrifying match point, because that level of insane mental courage is exactly what separates the true legends from everyone else. Let us talk about that brilliant strategic pivot down there. That single breathtaking shot down the line was not just a stunning winner to save a desperate match. It was a loud and permanent declaration to the entire tennis world. A brand new and fully evolved Alex Eala had officially arrived. She had successfully weaponized her perfect timing to steal precious time away from the heavy baseline hitters. She had finally solved the impossible and brutal puzzle of modern power tennis. And the rest of the tour was completely and totally unprepared for the absolute storm that was coming next. What happened next can only be described as a complete and brutal dismantling of the professional hierarchy. Armed with her new and aggressively forward court position, Alex went on an absolute tear across the globe. She started slicing through massive tournament draws and left top-seeded players looking totally confused and completely helpless. We are not just talking about winning a few lucky matches or pulling off a random upset here and there. We are talking about a relentless and systematic execution of the absolute best players in the world. She went from being a completely unpredictable wildcard to an inevitable force of nature. Imagine stepping onto a blistering hot hard court against a former world number one. The opponent is 6 feet tall and hits the ball so hard it sounds like a gunshot. The old version of Alex would have braced for impact and retreated. The new Alex simply steps forward and intercepts the ball with the cold precision of a master tactician. She is completely robbing them of their greatest weapon. She is turning their own massive physical momentum directly against them. She was stepping onto the court and neutralizing pure power with brilliant geometry and absolute precision. The massive serves that used to push her back into the shadows were suddenly coming back faster than the servers could recover. You could hear the dramatic difference in the stadium audio. The heavy thud of raw power was constantly interrupted by the sharp and lethal pop of perfect baseline timing. The television commentators who previously wrote her off as too small were now screaming into their microphones in total disbelief. They were watching a young tactical genius rewrite the entire modern playbook in real time. They were witnessing the birth of a completely new archetype in professional tennis. She was breaking down opponents mentally before she even broke them physically. Players who were used to dominating entirely with sheer athletic force were suddenly hesitating on their footwork. They were overhitting the ball and making desperate unforced errors because Alex was constantly suffocating their precious reaction time. You could see the pure panic in the eyes of major champions. They were swinging as hard as humanly possible, but the ball kept coming. Back earlier and deeper. It was a suffocating and inescapable trap. And this brings us directly to an incredible piece of data that really proves the absolute magnitude of her historic transformation. Here is an exclusive radar tracking statistic you will certainly not hear on standard television broadcasts. Since her massive turning point match, Alex is now hitting the ball exactly 0.8 meters closer to the baseline than the professional tour average. Let that massive reality sink in for a moment. That distance might sound incredibly small to a casual observer, but in elite professional tennis, it is an absolute eternity. She is literally stealing away critical fractions of a second from the fastest athletes on the planet. That stolen time translates directly to the absolute most critical moments of the game. Statistical databases show that right now in the current season, she holds the absolute highest breakpoint conversion rate on the entire professional tour. When the pressure reaches a terrifying boiling point and the match is perfectly balanced on a razor-thin edge, she simply does not blink. She uses her incredible tactical mind and her newly forged nerves of steel to completely shatter the confidence of her rivals. She thrives in the exact moments where other players completely collapse under the heavy weight of expectation. She was not just winning professional tennis matches anymore, she was completely outsmarting the entire athletic system. She was proving on a global stage that absolute precision is far deadlier than raw explosive power. But this incredible and historic run means something far bigger than just a massive and shocking rise in the global rankings. The massive takeover engineered by Alex is exposing a fundamental and critical flaw in how the entire world evaluates elite athletic talent. She is proving match after exhausting match that pure physical power can always be neutralized by elite timing and unmatched court geometry and a total refusal to back down. We have spent the last 10 years as a society obsessing over taller athletes and faster racket speeds and explosive gym numbers. We completely forgot about the lethal and quiet power of a brilliant tactical mind. We forgot that a smaller fighter with a sharper blade can always take down a giant. Tennis academies all over the world are already beginning to change their entire curriculum because of what she is doing right now. Coaches who used to tell smaller kids to pick a different sport are suddenly pointing to the television and telling them to watch Alex. She is single-handedly proving that the human mind and perfect biomechanics can overcome sheer genetic lottery. This is not just a hot streak or a lucky season. This is a complete paradigm shift in the fundamental physics of professional tennis. She has become a massive beacon of hope and an enormous source of national pride for the Philippines. You can literally feel the ground shake when she plays a majors tournament because an entire country is roaring right behind her. But her breathtaking story reaches far beyond national borders and patriotic pride. She is a profound and living inspiration for every single underdog athlete walking onto a court or a field who has ever been told they are just too small to compete. She took every brutal critique and every painful loss and every lonely night in a cheap hotel room and forged them into an absolutely unbreakable weapon. The scared young girl who was bullied behind the baseline is completely and permanently gone. The underdog has officially become the absolute apex predator of the modern tour. She controls the pace and she dictates the terms of engagement, and she absolutely refuses to apologize for her sheer brilliance. The entire landscape of the professional sport has completely shifted underneath our feet, and there is absolutely no going back to the old way of playing. The only terrifying question left is exactly how on earth the rest of the tour is going to stop her now. The biggest tournament of the year is rapidly approaching, and every single top player is scrambling in the dark to decode her new aggressive baseline strategy. Coaches are staying up late analyzing her geometry and desperately searching for a hidden weakness that might not even exist anymore. Will the physical giants of the sport find a way to break through her perfect timing, or will she completely shock the entire sporting world and raise her first major championship trophy under the bright stadium lights? You absolutely need to know exactly how this incredible underdog story ends. Make sure you hit subscribe right now so you do not miss our upcoming deep dive into her tactical masterclass, because the revolution has truly just begun.